convener of Future Schools Alliance. Jen is a future-focused educator with a vision to make schools better. She's forged a career as an educator in progressive schools around the world, including Green School in Bali, Think Global School in the US, and more recently, Press Hill School in Melbourne. Jen's experience on the ground in trailblazing schools has given her a deep understanding of the mindset needed to implement change. I'll hand it over to Jen. Thank you. And just lastly, there is an opportunity to put questions in the pigeonhole if you so choose. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome. My first international teaching position was a little unconventional, to say the least. I ended up here. This is East Timor in early 2000, and I was actually out there with the United Nations UNV program. Now, whether I had the experience needed for this role is entirely debatable. I had arrived in this country just emerging from civil war, armed with my degree. I was now a qualified visual arts teacher with a minor in Indonesian. Nonetheless, for the next 12 months, I would teach in villages across Timor-Leste. And it really did mark the beginning of a career in international education that's led me to live, work and travel in over 50 different countries during the past 2 decades. And I've been really fortunate. I've been able to work in some of the world's most innovative schools, as Adam said, Green School in Bali, and more recently, Think Global School. This is the world's first travelling international boarding school where we would travel to 4 different countries a year and teach in country. When I use the word innovative here in context of schools and education, what I'm referring to is the ways in which we can stay relevant, connected and up to date, so that the education we're providing our young people is the most relevant and responsive to their needs in this time of truly unprecedented change. My name is Jen Buchanan, thank you Adam, and I am convener of communities with Future Schools Alliance. For those of you who have not heard of Future Schools Alliance, the FSA was formed in 2018 by Peter Hutton, former principal at Templestowe College, and David Runge, one of Australia's leading thought leaders in educational futures and adaptive cultures. Now my role, I've got this very privileged position in the FSA. I get to work with leadership teams across future schools, not only here in Australia, but internationally. And in the context of the work that I do with the FSA, when I talk about communities, I'm talking about the ways in which we can build social ecosystems that support best practice. And support best practice in 3 key areas. Firstly, the ways in which we empower those around us to realise their potential and go beyond. The ways in which we build deep, authentic and meaningful connections, not only within our own communities, but beyond. And thirdly, how together in this ecosystem we navigate emerging opportunities and challenges as we navigate this changing educational landscape as we consider the future of education. So firstly, I'd just like to say a warm thank you to The Age for hosting the summit today. And a warm thank you to everybody here today, not only physically here in the crowd, but all of you watching virtually wherever you are. Thank you. Let's enjoy the discussion today around the future of education. Now, there's many things about our schools, absolutely, that work beautifully for many of our young people. But equally, there are significant parts of schooling that simply just don't work for others. And if you start to look at some of the statistics and the numbers out there, they can actually be quite alarming. 25% of young people attend less than 90% of school days. Now, when I read it the first time, I thought 90% is all right, isn't it? You know, I'd be happy with that on a maths exam. But actually, what this means is 1 in every 4 young people in Australia miss up to a month of school in any given school year. In the latest Mission Australia Youth reports, 2,500 young people surveyed, 40% of those in that age range of 15 to 19 years of age report feeling stressed either all of the time or most of the time. Now this one got me. Australia. 1 in 6 young people in Australia live in poverty. And if you're from a disadvantaged background, by the time you are 15 years of age, you are likely to be 2 to 3 years behind your peers in numeracy and literacy. So this brings me to my first point, and that's us. As we consider the future of education and we build these social ecosystems, how we empower the people around us to realise their potential and beyond. So 3 years ago, I was with Think Global School and we spent a term out in Mumbai in India. And it was an experience early one morning that really shifted a way of thinking for me. I'd gone for an early morning walk, and on this walk, I passed this group of young children sitting on the side of the road. They're literally sitting in the dirt on scrap pieces of cardboard they'd managed to find. But it was what happened next that caught me off guard. As I got closer to this scene, I noticed this young woman sitting there with these children. And she's sitting on a mat, and she's slightly obscured by the sheer number of children surrounding her. And in that moment, I realised what I was observing was a makeshift classroom. That was the first time I met Kavita. Kavita would explain to me that a few years previous, she'd organised a collective of women in her society to set up a roadside classroom. And each morning they would go in and they would take turns in teaching in this roadside classroom. And by doing so, in educating these young children would have a greater chance of being accepted into their local schools to continue their education. And I share this story because in that moment in meeting Kavita, there was this woman that had this vision. She had this aspirational vision of how she could attempt to break that cycle of poverty. But in looking to achieve her vision, she also looked for opportunity to empower the women in her society to realise the impact they could have in breaking that cycle of poverty and making a difference. See, it's one thing for us to all have our own aspirational vision. Absolutely, hold on to that. But when we have that aspirational vision and we look for opportunities to empower those around us, we create a difference that is far bigger than ourselves. A ripple effect that is far greater than we could achieve on our own. Disruption, resilience, and new possibilities. That is what the summit is asking us to consider today. And we come here today as an ecosystem of the stakeholders of education, and we have this beautiful opportunity right here, right now, to evolve our narrative in education, to create a greater sense of equity for all our young people. In order to know where we need to evolve to, we need to know where we're evolving from. Currently in Australia, 1 in 5 young people don't actually finish school, and in some of our more disadvantaged areas and remote areas, that can be as high as 1 in 2. And what is the impact of this? If you are a young person and you don't finish school, within a year of leaving school, you are far more likely to be disengaged from work and study on a long-term basis. 40% of students are regularly disengaged in the classroom. These passively disengaged students can be up to 1 to 2 years behind their peers in a range of subjects. Oh, this one. Australia is the only country in the world that ranks its students for university entrance. Yes, other countries use a score, absolutely. But they don't ask their students to compete against each other in a ranking system in order to gain a place at university. All right, bit of interaction here. How many of us in the audience were at school in BI days? That's before internet. Maybe just you was not. But the rest of us look like we could possibly be there. So if you're at school in, like me, I was actually there the late 70s, all through the 80s and through the bit of the 90s. If you're at school BI days, we could argue school was needed as a place for knowledge acquisition. Hours spent reading books, hours spent in a library, hours spent in a classroom with knowledge passed from teacher to student. In contrast, this generation of learners, and that's ourselves included, we are flooded with information. In fact, we could spend our lifetime many times over just reading Wikipedia entries, watching TED Talks, and taking free online courses. And how do I know this? I looked it up on the internet. So despite this, there's an irony in this. We are more connected than ever in this digital online world. And yet we're more isolated and disconnected than we've ever been. In fact, 1 in 2 young Victorians report feeling lonely either sometimes or all of the time. And Australia, like many countries around the world, is facing a loneliness epidemic. So it brings me to my second point. As we consider the future of education and we build these social ecosystems, we look for opportunities to build deep, authentic and meaningful connections, not only within our own communities, but beyond. Okay, some of you might recognise this, others maybe not. This is where I got to work a few years ago. This is Green School in Bali. And wow, you walk into Green School and it's got these soaring bamboo structures. It's beautiful. All of the concepts and ideas pivot around sustainability. And I'll be honest with you, at my point of arrival at Green School, my awareness around sustainability was fairly superficial to say the least. You know, had a keep cup on hand and a shopping bag I'd occasionally remember to take to the shops with me. Well, it was a chance meeting at Green School that completely shifted all of this for me. So one afternoon, I'm not far from Green School, and I'm in a little village where I meet Ibu Kadek. And Ibu Kadek is there and she's like pounding away on tree roots to make a natural dye. Now, as an art teacher, I quickly befriended Ibu Kadek, and she became my mentor, teaching me how to make a range of natural dyes from a variety of plants indigenous to Bali, to Indonesia. Maybe not so much teaching me about public health, but it was a wonderful journey because it allowed me this freedom to really think about the visual arts program at Green School and how it could be far more connected with community. It evolved to a point where on any given day there would be artists in the studio, be it kite makers or batik artists or wood carvers. And likewise, we'd head out into the village and spend afternoons with local craftsmen and women, such as afternoons with Ibu Kadek. From a sustainability perspective, it also gave me this wonderful opportunity to explore ways to make the materials we were using far more sustainable. And we got to a point where we'd make all of our own paper, source pigments for making our own paints, even tapioca for our glues. And so that we had no negative impact on the environment and was true to that approach to sustainability of the Green School. Now, I stand up here today and I share this story with a sense of ease and maybe even a bit of nostalgia as I look back on this time. But at the time when I was there and evolving this program, I was filled with huge waves of vulnerability and anxiety as I kind of had to let go of old ways of doing things. And I share this story with you because as we do look for opportunity to evolve the future of education, it may well be the case that we have to leave some things behind. And likewise, as we deepen these connections with communities, our very values, our very ideas, and our very basic assumptions on how we not only view education, but how we view the world, are likely to be evolved. And that's a good thing. Okay. Well, 2020. It was quite a year. Look, I guess the pandemic, it showed us not only how fragile our world is, but it also showed us as a community how quick we're able to adapt and respond when facing a challenge. And as we look to the future of education, I'd like us to consider it's about all of us. It's not only just about our students, it's also about our staff, and it's about our wider communities. Because for some of our staff at present, this career, it's not easy. In the latest Principal Wellbeing Report, 38% of principals reported being subjected to a form of physical violence in the last year, and that was despite us being in a lockdown. Teachers are among those professions with some of the highest rates of burnout and job stress of any profession. And 40% of new graduates will leave this profession within the first 5 years of graduating from university. So I'd like us to consider, as we look forward to the future of education, we're considering the opportunities and not the limitations, which brings me to my third and final point. And that is, as we build this social ecosystem, as we consider the future of education, we look for opportunities as a community to navigate those emerging challenges and also those opportunities in this changing educational landscape. Okay, it looks a little different here. This is a few years ago. This is in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, where I was working for a few years. Now, at my point of arrival, women were not allowed to drive. This changed about 2 years ago. But not only were we not allowed to drive, we weren't allowed to even cycle and ride our bikes, which posed a little bit of a problem because I arrived as this mad keen cyclist. Anyway, I was fortunate enough and I met a couple of other mad keen cyclists, and every second Friday, we'd head miles and miles and miles out into the desert, away from the eyes of the tower, and we'd go on these epic bike rides. On one of these bike rides, a friend of mine pulls out a map that's being handed to him from expat to expat, full of trails and markings to follow. So off we go, and we're on this epic bike ride, and we're maybe half an hour in. Completely lost. This map that we're trying to follow makes absolutely no sense. There's been so much development and building in these smaller villages outside of Riyadh that the map we're holding is no longer fit for purpose. Are you following me here? This is a metaphor. In this educational landscape, it is changing at such a rate. And as we consider the future of education, there will be some hurdles on our journey. There will be some obstacles, and there will be some paths that we have to change direction. But what we need to make sure we're doing is checking that the map that we're holding is still fit for purpose. Is it still relevant? And is it meeting the needs of all in our community? Despite schools being portrayed as often resistant to change, if 2020 showed us anything, educators around the world are more than willing to adapt to the situation, are more than willing to try new technologies, and are more than willing to try models of schooling. So as we consider the future of education, we are building a social ecosystem that not only empowers those around us to realise their potential, but empowers them to go beyond. Building an ecosystem that develops deep and authentic, meaningful connections not only in our own communities, but beyond. And building these social ecosystems that allow us together to navigate the emerging opportunities and challenges in a changing educational landscape. Disruption, resilience, and new possibilities. That is what the conference is asking us to consider today. Enjoy the debate. I will be around later. Come and have a talk. Thank you for all being here today.